it feels like Lynch is trying his damnedest to get away with making the weirdest movie he possibly can under such tight scrutiny. The David Lynchiness of it just shines through. Like, why the is there a cat with a rat taped to it in a box?
Oh my God. I had so many questions. Also, that cat and rat looked so mad. They were just like,
what is happening?
We're literally natural enemies, and you're taping us together? Like, get out of here.
Well, I mean, it must have been pretty influential on the toy makers because the Fade action figure from 1984 includes the cat in the box.
Oh my
That's
God.
Right. Fun for everybody.
Like there's a take-home kit, so you can do that to your own cat and rat.
Rat sold separately.
Making stuff is hard, especially in the entertainment world, where big egos, bigger budgets, and just plain bad luck can make things go horribly wrong. And we're going behind the scenes of these disastrous, never-ending, and often dangerous productions to find out why it was a shit show.
Hello, friends. This is It Was a Shit Show. My name is Ian. I am joined by Clint.
Hello.
And Ray.
Hello.
Yeah. The whispering.
Because everybody in Dune whispers all the
whisper.
time.
The spice.
The spice.
With Dune Part 2 hitting theaters on March 1st, we are going all the way back to 1984 for the original Dune movie, written and directed by David Lynch. But much like our episode on The Conqueror, I did no research on the movie because today we have an inside source. You may have read his articles on Wired or Slash Film or IGN, or you may have very well seen him promoting his book, a masterpiece in disarray, David Lynch's Dune, an oral history. Max Evry, thank you for joining us.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Yes.
Oh, man.
How many times have you used that?
Too many.
I'm disappointed that I didn't think of that. That's brilliant.
Never gets old.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on the show. At first, when I heard it was called It Was a Shit Show, I thought it was about my last 3 websites that I work for. But it will also work very well for this movie we're talking about tonight, because
good.
when you think shit shows, like this was up there.
I got a message from a casting agent who had come to Seattle and was auditioning actors for the role of Paul. And of course, I thought it was someone playing a prank on me. Turns out it was real. It was a coveted role, I guess, in Hollywood at the time. They were looking at a lot of actors. The experience was so outside the realm of what I knew to that point. I mean, I was 23, just graduated from acting school. No idea what was happening, honestly. But I knew the book really well. And I had played the role of Paul. I had been Paul in my imagination for so many years. And here I was able to bring him to life.
I'm especially grateful that this movie has been brought up and for this episode, because I, for one, have never seen Dune until a couple of days ago. And it was one of those movies that I knew existed. I knew it had a following. I knew there was the 2021 film that came out. And my brothers are clamoring for that movie. Not clamoring, but they came out like, "Oh, it's really good. Oh, you haven't seen it yet? You got to see it. You haven't seen it? You got to see it." Like, well, shouldn't I watch the first 1984 one first? Like, no, you don't need to do that. Yeah. So, because Dune's always been on my radar, but it's never I've never actually have okay, I have time. I'll sit down and watch it. So that's why I'm really glad that this came to us. Like, hey, okay, now you have to watch Dune.
Have a reason to watch
it.
Yes.
Max, how many times have you seen this version of Dune?
Oh God, I don't really know. It's weird because it was not one of those movies like Star Wars where I watched it where I ruined the VHS tape when I was a kid. I watched it for the first time as a kid on Sci-Fi Channel, and it kind of bemused me, and I didn't quite get it. And I was reading the book. I was reading the book concurrently. with watching because my dad was a huge fan of the novels. I didn't know it at the time, but I was watching the shitty Alan Smithy version, which was made for television. There's two official versions of the movie. There's the one that David Lynch released.
Oh my God.
Which was 2 hours and 17 minutes. And then there's the 3-hour made for television cut, which Lynch wanted to work on, but Universal didn't want to pay him anything to do it.
There's a version out there that's 43 minutes longer?
Yes.
I can't even imagine it. Like when we were watching I'm assuming we watched Lynch's version.
Yes.
I was just like, oh my God, how am I still watching this movie? Like it felt eternal somehow.
Well, my guess is that extra 43 minutes is just a lot more of like spacey, like psychedelic shit where like when you drink the water of life and like all of a sudden you're starting to see ripples in space and it's just 45 more minutes of that.
But but to answer your question, I don't know how many times I've seen it since writing the book because I've kind of watched it like in chunks a lot, but all the way through, I don't know, maybe a couple dozen times. I think I did a podcast about it like 10 years ago where I was making fun of it a lot. I was like, this movie is kind of silly. And, and then I got the opportunity to do this book. And then as I got more and more into it, into the writing process and into the watching process, the process of actually dissecting film, I just became more and more fascinated with it. That is not to say that I'm not psychotic. I do realize it's a movie that's very flawed. I love it because of its flaws in some ways. So you guys can have at it in terms of it's not that sacred to me, but I think it's fascinating. Comparing it to the recent one, the Villeneuve one. I'm glad that one exists, even though I like it less, because I think it makes an interesting contrast to Lynch's. For sure. Like a lot. I know so many people who didn't care for the Lynch one that much. Then they saw the Villeneuve one, and they're like, "Well, the Lynch one had some character to it." Things like that. So
I don't know if you're going to go into this, but I just had a real quick question. Did Frank Herbert see the David Lynch version of it?
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing that I find hilarious because it's like there are a lot of people in the Dune community, the Dunity or whatever you call it, and they're like, oh, Lynch's version is such bullshit. Like he didn't, it's like a slap in the face to Herbert's book. It's and all this stuff, and it's like he's the only filmmaker who worked with Herbert and like actually consulted with him. Herbert was on the set.
Oh, okay.
Like there were things that obviously there were things that they had to cut and streamline and change.
Yeah, adaptations.
Yeah, but he understood that. Herbert understood that, and he really loved the film. I believe when it was David's cut, when it was about a 3-hour movie, and I think he publicly spoke fondly of the film when it came out. Because he had financial stakes in it. I think privately he was a little bummed about how it all turned out. Also because if it had been successful, it would have been a bigger windfall for him.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. But he actually he died about a year after the movie came out, and but no, he was involved. And I mean, at one point Herbert wrote a version of the script in the 70s. It was like 320 pages long.
Oh God.
Whoa. It was in 2 parts, like Denis Villeneuve's. Frank did have a say in this movie, and and I think a lot of people forget that and don't give credit where credit is due. Like it's very true. It's very true to the book.
That makes me like it more. I think. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again, but it made me like it more.
So I saw the 2021 version first, and was surprised at how much I liked it, because I'd never read the books, wasn't really a fan of the property or anything. I knew it existed, like we've said, but I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like this is really interesting, like characters are interesting, plot's interesting, and I really liked it. And then when we watched the 84 version, I thought, oh my God, I'm so glad I watched the 2021 version first, because I would not know what the fuck was going on in this movie without like
it was helpful. Helpful.
Yeah, like the Villeneuve version is a lot more like straightforward and like movie-ish, right, in its narrative and its storytelling. And I was like, oh, thank God, because like I at least know what's going on in the David Lynch version now.
See, I tried to watch the 84 one with my wife, and maybe about like 20 minutes in, she like looks at me, she goes, "Do you know what's going on?" I'm like, I really don't know. She's like, "Well, you can finish this without me." And we changed it to watch something else, and then I finished it by myself. And then I went back to her and I was like, "Well, I finished it." And she's like, "Well, did you understand it?" I'm like, after a little while, yeah, I started to get it. And that's only because I was kind of reading along the synopsis on Wikipedia at the same time. It's got a lot of fun elements and a lot of things that like a lot of science fiction pulls from to this day. I mean, you think about Star Wars with like the Force, that's the voice. You think of
the spice.
There's an emperor, there's spice. Yeah. Like,
Yep,
it's
for sure.
I feel like George Lucas is just in, what school did he attend? It doesn't matter. He's like, oh, Frank Herbert.
USC.
Yeah, he's attending USC. He's like, oh, I'm going to read Dune. Oh, this is great. I'm going to write it all down. Like,
But no, but you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, Dune is one of those, perennial, sci-fi classics that, it took so long to get to the screen that so many things pillaged from it. And then even in the interim between the Lynch movie and the Villeneuve movie, so many films, took stuff from it, like The Matrix, John Carter was another, unfortunate example of that, where it's like so many things, including Star Wars, had stolen from the John Carter of Mars books. And then they made the movie and everybody's like, yawn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By the time it came around, nobody cared.
Yeah.
Yeah. A friend of mine even pointed out that like the Denis Villeneuve movie actually does like the flying shuttlecraft.
The dragonflies?
The dragonflies.
The dragonfly wing, yeah. And he's like, well, Black Panther did that like 3 years ago.
Oh my God.
like,
I didn't even think about that either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
it doesn't mean it doesn't look any less cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Exactly.
So we don't want to ruin all the surprises in your book because we want people to go out and buy it.
Yes.
But so we're going to do like a flashcard kind of version of the shit show stories of the making of Dune. So Max, take us to Arrakis.
Well, like I alluded to, like the movie had been in development for a long, long time. Actually, it was, funnily enough, Roger Corman was the first person to option the book or try to option it. I think he wanted to shoot a version in like Yugoslavia or something like that. Obviously, very cheaply.
Yeah.
But another producer by the name of Arthur P. Jacobs came in and swooped up the rights. Arthur P. Jacobs, best known for the original 5 Planet of the Apes movies, and also Dr. Dolittle, which is another great shit show.
Yeah.
We'll
get there.
You'll get there, yes. But yeah, so Arthur P. Jacobs developed it for a little bit. At one point, he was courting David Lean to direct it. David Lean didn't want to have anything to do with it. I think he wanted Haskell Wexler to do it. It was going to be kind of, like the Planet of the Apes movies. It was going to be a very kind of counterculture, take on, like vibing with what was happening in
society
in the mid 70s. Yeah. But Arthur P. Jacobs died of a heart attack. And then a French consortium led by a guy named Michel Seydoux bought the rights out, and they gave it to Alejandro Jodorowsky. And I don't want to get too much into Jodorowsky's, but like that was like, I think he spent 2 years on it, spent like $2 million developing it. He had all these crazy designs and ideas. And there's a whole documentary about it called Jodorowsky's Dune. Everybody should watch it.
So is this after Star Wars?
Okay, so that's the thing. It's like, Jodorowsky's Dune was going to be pre-Star Wars.
Okay.
But a lot of people, including Gary Kurtz, the producer of Star Wars, saw the big book of storyboards and things that they had. And there are a lot of things that George Lucas also stole from Jodorowsky for Star Wars and a lot of other movies too. Like basically the storyboard, like the movie never got made, but the storyboards were all through Hollywood. And in the documentary, you see like lots of different films that stole from it: Flash Gordon, Terminator, Contact.
Oh wow!
Yeah, because it's kind of like one of the biggest pillars of sci-fi is Dune, and so it makes sense that all these other people are going to just steal from it.
Yeah,
but specifically from Jodorowsky.
Yeah,
right.
And so then, basically, when that film fell apart, Dino De Laurentiis was kind of waiting in the wing. He already wanted it. But he sort of waiting in the wings, and he bought it out from the French consortium.
Now, this is probably in your book, but I was just kind of looking at like the potential cast for this Jodorowsky version.
Mhm.
And some of these sound pretty cool. Like he wanted, and you can tell me if this is true or not, because it is just on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
But like Salvador Dali as the Emperor,
Yes.
and Orson Welles as Baron Harkonnen. Like that would have been so cool to see Orson Welles just all floating up in space.
Yeah. It's interesting is like for whatever reason he was willing to do it for Jodorowsky. When Rafaela De Laurentiis, the producer of David Lynch's version, contacted him to be in David Lynch's version, Orson Welles was like on the phone, and he apparently paused for a long time, and then said, "You mean the floating fat man?" Hung up the phone, and like, that was it for Orson. So
that's fine. Well, I mean, from what we know about Orson Welles, the man did not want to get up off of anything. Like, but
Yeah.
I mean, I understand, but like they're going to
Floating would
strap
be
you
perfect.
they're going to strap you into something and float you around. You don't have to stand up; they'll do it for you.
Yeah. I think also at the time he was like 500 pounds or something. It's like, do you want to be the people who killed Orson Welles? And so, that didn't happen. But and Mick Jagger, David Carradine, they were all going to be in Jodorowsky's. Jodorowsky was going to cast his son, Brontis, as Paul. And Brontis trained for like 2 years for this part, like rigorously, like learning like martial arts and all this stuff. Jodo's a character. I love him. Still alive. It's like 93 or something.
Holy shit.
Once De Laurentiis had it, he developed a script with Herbert, which I have. It's crazy long. It just didn't work. And then he decided to attach a director first and then get a writer involved. And so he got Ridley Scott, hot off of Alien. And, and then Ridley worked on it for 7 or 8 months. They were like working on sets and at Pinewood, and H.R. Giger, who worked with him on Alien, was doing some designs for it. And a guy named Rudy Wurlitzer was writing the script. And like I said, it had these incest overtones. And I think the Fremen were going to be based on like the American Indian kind of, like it was going to be, kind of a movie about colonialism, more about colonialism and stuff like that. And the budget came in like $50 million, just the preliminary budget.
Wow.
And nobody liked the script, and then also Ridley Scott's brother died, and he just like, and Dino wanted to shoot the movie in Mexico, and Ridley went to Mexico and he saw the studio where he'd be making the movie, and he's like,
this will never get done.
Yeah, he's like, let's not make this a hardship, and so like he left the film, and then they saw this was around the time that Elephant Man came out, and like Elephant Man, David Lynch's second film, is a Oscar caliber. I think it was nominated for like 4 or 5 Oscars, and David became like overnight like this sensation because like this movie was a big, pretty decent hit.
Yeah,
it was also artistic, and it was, it had this flair to it. But he was also, it was him making a Hollywood movie. That was him basically being a gun for hire. And if you've ever seen his first movie, Eraserhead, is nothing like it.
Yeah, it's fascinating that he'd only done.
Haven't seen it.
He's only done 2 movies at that point.
Yeah,
and one of them is basically a student film gone nuts, and then the other one is not something you would associate with David Lynch. So they're looking at this kind of like, I guess, how George Lucas was kind of like, nobody would have assumed that he could pull Star Wars out. And then they were like, well, maybe this guy can do it. Like it seems like a big risk because this movie seems huge.
Yeah.
That's the thing though, is like Eraserhead by its own metric was very successful for a midnight movie.
Yeah.
And then Elephant Man was very successful by its own metric as a classic Hollywood biopic. And so you look at these two things and you could just read anything you want into the tea leaves. So like George Lucas at one point wanted David to direct Return of the Jedi.
I remember that.
You know, now you're like, of course not. But back then, you know, it's like, who knew? Tom Mount, who was the executive at Universal, who championed David for Dune, he wanted David to do Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh man!
So it's like this tells you, you know, when you have a young director who's only done a couple things, you know, it's almost like you try to plug him into anything. And I personally think that he was a good choice to direct Dune. But I you know, I think that the people involved, I think they were expecting the David Lynch who made Elephant Man.
Yeah.
They were not expecting the David Lynch who made Eraserhead. And it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. Like, he hadn't made enough at that point to have established his style and his
Who
like
he is.
auteurism and who he is. So they're just like, yeah, he made these 2 really great movies. They're super dichotomous, but like they're both good in different ways. And if you mush those together, like that could make Dune work, you know? And that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, as a choice for picking a director.
Yeah.
Like, just the names that you talked about who tried to make this previously, right, were like pretty big established directors. And
I mean, what's the final budget on the David Lynch's Dune?
Well, that's a point of contention.
About 40.
Well, if you read my book, you'll find that it may or may not have been a money laundering opportunity for Dino De Laurentiis.
Oh,
that doesn't surprise me.
Interesting.
There are many people, including Lynch himself, who have been like, well, Dino was a crafty fellow and he said it was 45 million, but it was much, much less.
He was a chef with those books, just cooking those books up.
Yeah, and it was in Mexico, so the dollar was like gold. You know, it was somebody told me, you know, Dino put all the money for Dune in a Mexican bank like 2 years before they made the movie, and in those years that the money was just in there waiting to be spent, the interest on it was enough for him to then use to make Conan the Destroyer. So they made a whole other movie, a whole other epic movie.
Wow.
With the money, with just the interest that they made in the bank. And then you're also talking about Mexican labor.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
For, you know, like if they had made the movie in Hollywood, in LA, it would have cost about $70 million.
I mean, based off of the budget, like even then, it still seems like a crazy expensive movie. Like it seems, like you said, a little kitschy, a little like a little weird looking. But when you watch it, you kind of have to be impressed.
There's a lot of impressive, like practical and visual effects happening in it.
Yeah, like those weird big headed like worm dudes, like in the spacing guild in the big tube.
The guild navigators.
Yeah, like those effects were pretty cool. Like those, they're spitting some weird space goo out of their mouth.
Yeah, there's a great part in my book where they talk about, somebody talks about the day they wheeled the guildsmen onto the set, and David Lynch was just so happy, and then he was looking at it and he's like, oh, it needs something. It needs something. Can we get some afterbirth? And somebody translated that to Carlo Rambaldi, who made the creature, and he's like, "What?" He said he went back and got something, and they smeared it on the creature.
There you go.
So, I don't know if somebody was having a baby in the lot, but
who knows?
Just had like loose tubs of goop around, like this will do.
Yeah. I mean, you know, not to jump ahead too much, but like that was kind of something that Raffaele De Laurentiis had to deal with in terms of Lynch. His feet weren't always on the ground. Like he was, by all accounts, a very, very pleasant person to work with. He was perfectly wonderful to work with, but he would just get crazy.
Was it because all the spice that he was ingesting?
The spice.
At one point, do you guys remember the scene where Jürgen Prochnow, the Duke, is on the table and he bites into the poison gas tooth and the smoke is coming out of his cheek?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So originally Lynch wanted to cut a hole in the actor's cheek and poured the smoke out of it. And then when Raffaella, the producer, was like, "No, you're not going to do that," he's like, "Oh, well, then do it to me. You can cut my cheek open." And she's like, "I'm not going to be chopping up my director."
Whoa.
I can just picture that actor's face. He's like, This is the moneymaker.
Yeah, this is why
this is how I make my living.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
He did actually get burned when they shot that scene. His face got burned really
Whoa.
bad. And not only that, but the scene, the shot where he's getting burned is in the movie.
And then Lynch was like, "Well, you're lucky. I wanted to cut your cheek originally, and now I
got
just
off
burned
lucky.
it."
Yeah, got off with a warning. Yeah. So, Lynch met Dino, and even though he'd heard about Dino's reputation, Dino De Laurentiis, Dino had a pretty bad rep in terms of, cheaping out at, on movies and or being very heavy-handed with the directors and kind of telling people what to do, and also just kind of not having very good taste. Like, he's a little bit of a vulgarian.
Here's how infamous he is.
Yeah.
I saw the name in the title cards and I was like, ooh. And I didn't even know why. I was like, why am I having that reaction? But somewhere in my brain, all of those ththings kind of buried themselves. Anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of like seeing Canon.
Right.
It's shockingly similar to Canon, although, the difference being when the guys behind Canon started to kind of try to make the movies that Dino De Laurentiis was making, these big, epic kind of movies, they fell on their faces.
Yeah.
Right.
You get Superman 4.
Yeah. But Dino, every once in a while, he would come up with a good one, he was behind Conan the Barbarian. He was behind 3 Days of the Condor.
Yeah, exactly. Then he's also behind Maximum Overdrive.
Right.
It's this huge... It's crazy.
Yeah, he had a very mixed reputation. But I mean, he started his career, with the Federico Fellini. He produced La Strada. He won an Oscar for it. So, he was an interesting guy. And, the thing that Raffaella told me in the book is, she said, my father truly loved two filmmakers, Federico Fellini and David Lynch.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that's one thing you have to understand about, David and Dino. Even though David knew he was walking into a buzzsaw, he kind of loved him anyway. And he on Dune it didn't really work, but then later they did do Blue Velvet together, and that worked a charm. Part of the problem was Dune was bigger than David. It was just a monster of a movie, and and it was the most expensive movie Universal Pictures had ever made at the time.
In Mexican pesos, it was most expensive.
It's just so frustrating because it's the trajectory of it was everybody was super behind David and his vision at the beginning, and then as the movie went on, and they were getting the bigger picture of the kind of movie they were getting from him, they're like, "Oh, this is not Star Wars."
Right.
Yeah.
"Oh, we're going to go way over budget. Oh, we're, he is not experienced with a movie of this magnitude." But nobody was.
Yeah.
Those didn't exist yet.
Yeah. This movie was more expensive than Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Wow.
Even George Lucas had never made a movie this big. So
that's interesting that they're like, "Oh, this isn't Star Wars," and so I imagine somebody on the set was probably, "Bitch, this was before Star Wars."
Yeah.
So Lynch, did he basically have full control during production?
No. So he had more control during pre-production. There were certain things he had to adhere to contractually, it had to be a PG movie. I think it eventually wound up being PG-13, but 1984 was the year the PG-13 rating was invented. But he's still trying to find a way to, to create the level of, weirdness and menace that he's really good at. It becomes very apparent that this movie's downfall is not attributable to just one person.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit David's inexperience, a little bit Dino kind of being Dino. It's a little bit Universal's Sid Sheinberg, who, like if you know anything about that era of movie making,
Very
like
controlling.
Sid Sheinberg was a real control freak. He was a lot like a Harvey Scissorhands. He was like he was constantly trying to, fix movies,
Metal.
to turn movies that weren't really super commercial. Like movies like Legend and Terry Gilliam's Brazil, and almost every movie that came through Universal that wasn't like a Spielberg movie, got some form of meddling from Sid Sheinberg. And it was just, I think, the size of it, like this movie just kind of crushed everybody underneath it because it was so big and it took so long to shoot. It was like principal photography in Churubusco Studios in Mexico, 6 months, followed by 6 months of model photography.
Whoa.
So they spent a year in
Oh
Mexico.
my God.
Wow.
Followed by another almost a year of editing, and the editing process got pretty torturous towards the end, to the point that like David, he had like basically 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like he didn't like what was happening to his movie. And the people who saw David's preferred 3-hour cut said that was much, much better than the movie that came out.
Now you said that principal photography lasted 6 months. Did all that just go like swimmingly, like a sandworm through it?
What were the big pain points for them?
So right off the bat, it's Mexico. The studio that they were shooting at, Churubusco, it was, and I think still is, Mexico's biggest and oldest, film studio. But at the time, it was falling into disrepair, and the government, it was owned by the government. The government was thinking of possibly shutting it down or even selling it to De Laurentiis. Dino had shot a couple of the Amityville sequels there, and I think it was becoming like his preferred studio because, of all the obvious financial advantages of filming in Mexico.
Yeah, the cheap labor.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have to go there, so
yeah, he just has to just to film there.
Yeah, but like just talking about Mexico, I mean, like you've got foodborne illness, you've got the air. If you've ever been to Mexico City, which I have, very hard for a gringo to breathe because it's super high elevation.
Yeah,
it's the pollution is intense. It's like the equivalent of smoking like 2 packs a day. Something like that. A lot of people got sick on this movie. Like there was a sick list every day.
Did Patrick Stewart get sick?
Probably. He ate the tacos. Yeah. Like I remember an interview he did where he's like, I was having tacos with Max von Sydow, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And
I want to see that movie. Just the two of them eating tacos.
My tacos
Sounds great.
with Max.
With Max, yeah, exactly.
Tacos with Max.
Beats the shit out of Tuesdays with Maury. I'll tell you that. So there's those problems, and then there was like the infrastructure problems because the studio was basically the dirt floors.
Right.
Bad wiring, no air conditioning, no anything really. I don't even think they had telephones at the beginning, and they were frequent brownouts throughout shooting. Like they'd be shooting a scene and the lights would just go out.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Yes. One of these sound stages burned down during filming.
Whoa.
The effects guy, John Dykstra, had set up these huge blue screens out of this 3M material. It's highly flammable. Like you weren't even allowed to smoke a cigarette around these things. But the lights that they had up it were like 150 degrees, and and the rigging in the ceilings was all wood. It was just like a powder keg basically.
It's just waiting to happen.
Yeah, luckily I don't think anybody got hurt. Dino probably took a nice write-off on it, but yeah, there's lots of stuff like that. I mean, like I talked to Fred Elms. He was the DP on Eraserhead, and he was like a second unit DP on this movie. He said first unit would just come and take his camera equipment away while he was shooting. They just be like, "We need this, Fred." And
Did they like push him around a little bit, give him a wedgie, a purple nurple?
Yeah.
We're taking this nerd. Just bully him. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you film in a foreign country, you're required to have a certain amount of crew from that country be working on the film. So they just stuck Fred with all the Mexican camera people, so you couldn't even understand any of
So the big translation
no.
issues.
Like when they went to Juarez to shoot the actual Dune sequences with the thousands of extras and stuff. Like,
My God.
those are mostly Mexican army and homeless people
Whoa.
in hot
Oh my
rubber
God.
still suits in 120 to 140 degree
Running.
August heat.
Whoa.
At one point, this is not a joke, they had this crowd of, whatever, thousands of guys in still suits. They were supposed to be running down a hill, so they put a guy at the bottom of a hill with a bunch of water. It said, "Run towards the water."
Oh my God. Okay, so
Yeah.
the extras had a really bad time.
What's my motivation in this scene?
You're really thirsty.
They're like, great, got it. Do not need to be an actor.
You're literally falling over and
Oh my
fainting
God.
every
Wow.
20 minutes.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. And from, I will say this, everybody who worked on it said that they loved working on it, even though it was a shit show, but it was not like
It's a fun one. A fun shit show.
Everybody really got along, and there was a feeling of camaraderie. I think a lot of that stemmed from David. I think he kind of set the tone. I remember years ago I talked to Rob Reiner, and because I over the years I'd talked to a lot of crew guys. I'd be like, "Who's the best director you've ever worked with?" And then I was like, "Oh, Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner's great. Like, he knows everybody's job. He's always really nice to everybody." And I asked Rob about it, and Rob said, "A movie set is like a fish; it stinks from the head down." So, so it's like
That's so true.
Director sets the tone, and and in this case, even though he was living like a daily nightmare.
Well, yeah, his set's burning down left and right, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he just was not having fun making this movie, but he never let it show to the cast and crew. He only had really one big blowout that is chronicled in my book. It involves Sean Young.
okay.
And that's why she's not in it that much?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, I remember.
Is that who plays Chani?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Sean Young. Yeah, I remember one of the other actors who was on set during that blowout was like, "David used the F word. Oh my God."
One time.
They were like, hey,
One time.
Hey, we got to keep this PG. This is a PG set.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
PG movie.
Do you want to get to PG-13 because you're only allowed one?
One.
For the entire 6-month shoot.
Yeah. Oh, I would have failed. That movie would have been rated R immediately for
Same
me.
here.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
No, but he was like a Jimmy Stewart type. Everything was like Peachy Keen and Nito Kino, and he's very like, and also he was doing his transcendental meditation twice a day, so he's very, whatever, centered.
That makes tons of sense when you say you're doing his transcendental meditation twice a day. This movie now just makes so much more sense to me now. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to work because he seems like a super chill dude. And if you can stay that like chill when all of that is happening around you and like still make people excited to come to work and work on your movie, then like you must be doing something right, because I've worked on a few sets. You're right. Like it stinks from the head down. And I've worked on a few sets where like it's just a nightmare because the people in charge make it a nightmare. And like everyone else like gets along because you're all trauma bonding. But
Yeah.
There is a reason why he has, I mean, not only is he at the cult status that he has, just being him, but he has a reputation of being just like the nicest weirdo that you've ever met.
That's what I want people to say about me.
he's just such a nice weirdo.
He's just the nicest weirdo.
He really is. I mean, I was lucky enough to get to chat with him for a little bit for my book, and he was great.
Oh, really? So you did get to what was that like?
Yeah. It's funny because that interview's at the very end, and I've gotten some really good reviews where the reviewer has been like, it's unfortunate that he obviously wasn't able to talk to David Lynch. And I'm like, you didn't finish the book.
That is
Gotcha.
amazing.
Gotcha. You didn't finish the book.
But you gave me 5 stars, so what can I do?
That is too funny.
I demand 6
man.
stars.
They have to go amend their review and add another star for the Lynch interview.
Exactly. 7.5 stars. But yeah, no, I did get for people who don't know, Masterpiece in Disarray, I talked to about 3 dozen people who worked on the movie in major roles, not just like Fremen number 7 or whatever. It was it was like these big people, and I talked to David, I talked to Raphael, I talked to Kyle, I talked to Sean, I talked to Virginia Madsen, Everett McGill.
I can't believe this was Kyle MacLachlan's first movie.
It's his first movie, yes, and
what a weird like introduction to filmmaking. I mean, maybe it explains most of his career, but I can't believe that was his first.
The funny thing about Kyle is like this might have been his first movie, but I think he was the only member of the cast who was actually like a Dune expert. And he had read the books when he was like 15 years old.
Oh,
and
okay.
He is like his favorite book. And so like he actually, there are a lot of people in the cast like Patrick Stewart and Virginia Madsen who didn't read it, and they would go to him to like, be like, what the fuck is a Bene Gesserit, or how do you Kwisatz a Haderach or whatever. And
Kyle, what's the Muad'Dib?
yeah. And so he Alicia Witt also read the whole book, by the way. She's a 7-year-old genius.
Oh, she played the sister?
Oh,
Yeah.
That's my second favorite character in this movie. I was like, this little girl is crushing right now.
Oh, yeah.
Crushing.
Alicia Witt was Alia, basically. She really did have red hair. She really was a child prodigy. She was like reading Shakespeare at age 2 or something.
Wow. Jeez.
Controlling other people's minds.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, she's a super genius. Like, she was cast because she was on a TV show at age 4 reciting Shakespeare.
Wow.
And they're like, because they needed a little girl who could appear beyond her years. And,
for sure.
She was stone cold perfect. Although they did get somebody else to dub her voice.
Okay, I was gonna ask that because we were joking about like, can you imagine what like the actual sound was from her? Like if she probably had like a little lisp, or she's just like, my brother approacheth right now, like this like tiny little girl voice that they like dubbed over.
You can see some deleted scenes on YouTube of her without the overdub, and she's like, the emperor is coming.
So perfect.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, it's a little bit like in Exorcist, where Linda Blair was overdubbed by Mercedes McCambridge when she was possessed.
That's right. Yeah, she's like said she like smoked like 3 packs a day or something to get her voice like that. Or she like gargled glass or something.
So, and I mean, just to jump ahead a little bit, I mean, a lot of the whole thing of like you were making fun of it, Ray, but the inner voice monologues.
Oh,
the kind of internal whispers. Spice. I need some right now. I have a hangover. That stuff was always baked into the script. But there was about 50% more added in post.
Interesting.
Wow.
So like kind of not what David wanted. David didn't want to use it as a crutch.
Yeah, so it was a technique that was used for a specific reason, and then they were like, well, this has been introduced, so now we can just like overuse it as a way to fill in plot holes. And so then like something really unique became basically overused to the point of being a joke.
Right. No, exactly.
Yeah.
So like and I mean, and even Raphaela admits like, we really didn't need to explain as much as we did. Like it's you can kind of let the movie speak for itself. And then on top of that, to add insult to injury, the Universal marketing department in their infinite wisdom decided to release the movie with a handout glossary of terms that
Oh my God.
they would give the audience before they saw the movie. And so it's like right away, like you're going, it's like, why do I need a dictionary for this movie?
This is what the
You know-
Kwanzaa
you know what?
is.
Yeah. You know what audiences love with their movie watching? Homework. They love reading. They love looking at dictionaries. Great idea.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking of that being exploited to the point of being a joke, there's a really great South Park episode called Turd Burglars. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but we're huge South Park fans. So when we first watched this, they were doing there's a lot of Dune references. The whole thing is like a Dune spoof, right? And we had never seen Dune. And we were like, what what the fuck are they talking about? What is going on? Because all the South Park characters kept going, the spies. He must be the one. And we're like, what are they talking about?
And there's a recurring joke about them, like a person just stops talking in the room. And it's just in their head.
And they're like,
speaking.
why?
And then the other people are like, what? Why are they taking so long to talk?
And so it's like such a perfect like South Park level spoof of Dune. And we had no idea what it was referencing. And so when we watched it, I'm like, we have to go rewatch that episode because I feel like I'm just going to find it so much more funny now.
Yeah,
Did you end
makes
up
way more
rewatching
sense.
that episode?
Oh yeah, we
watched
rewatched it last night.
Okay.
Still great.
I have not seen one full episode of South Park. Maybe I'll try and find that one and watch that one.
And for people who read my book, there's a whole section in the back about pop culture references to David Lynch's Dune.
Nice.
Oh.
And Turd Burglars is definitely in there.
Yay.
Yeah. I mean, there's also like, Ready Player One makes a couple references to it, the movie and the book.
Oh, the one that hit me over the head is this one quote from a song that I've always just said randomly for no fucking reason, and it's a Fatboy Slim song.
Weapon of choice.
Weapon of choice.
That's right.
Walk without rhythm, you won't attract the worm. Like I've said that for years.
Stared at each other and we're like, "Oh my god, that's what this comes from."
See, I thought that was a reference of drinking tequila.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that song is not just about Dune. That song is about David Lynch's Dune specifically because
the whole song is?
The whole song, yeah, because the title, Weapon of Choice, he's listen to the sound of my voice.
Oh my God.
It's my weapon of choice. So he's talking about the weirding modules, and the weirding modules are an invention of David Lynch to replace this sort of like desert kung fu from the book, which is called the weirding way.
Okay, so they finally, after all the fires and and all the fun in Mexico, so
I haven't even gotten to the part where the visual effects team walks off the film.
Yeah, that's where I want to go. I want to talk about the visual effects.
Let's get into it.
Like, because it seemed really intense.
The effects in this movie are a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
The original visual effects guy was a guy named John Dykstra, who won an Oscar for Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Also worked on Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Lots of great films. More recently, he's become really famous for movies like Spider-Man, like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, and he's become Quentin Tarantino's sort of go-to VFX guy. But he was even in '83 when they were making the movie, he was one of the top people in the business. It was like there was ILM, and then there was John Dykstra's company, Apogee. So they got a little ways into the movie. They did some worm tests. They did, they built those blue screens, and they built a few miniatures. I think the little ship that they take into the desert.
That not dragonfly.
Yeah, the one that's not a dragonfly in David Lynch's
The little box with like the little triangle wings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was built by Dykstra's people. It was very complicated, cost so much money, and it's in the movie for 6 seconds. So that was the kind of thing I think Raffaella was pissed about. There was a lot of money being spent on their end, and then in the book we get into more of the nitty gritty of why John Dykstra ultimately decided to walk off the film, but he did. he left the movie, and Raffaella had to scramble and basically cobble together a team from, America, Europe, Italy, all over the place. And they had very little prep time to, build all these models, so many, create so many optical effects. And David had to cut a lot of stuff that he had planned. I've seen the storyboards, the original Apogee storyboards for the effects that David wanted to do, and it was like mind-blowing. But it was also beyond their budget. I think one of the effects guys from the team that eventually came in to do the effects, he said something I think is very pertinent. He said, this movie had a huge budget. It needed an unlimited budget.
Oh, wow.
There are some absolute highlights, like the scale models of the ships when they're like getting off the ships, like, and again, if you watch the Corridor video about it, like where they kind of dive into those kind of stuff, but like how they achieved it is mind-boggling. And
those
then
were done during production. Those were not post, because the things you're talking about specifically, I forget the name of Emilio. That's it, Emilio Ruiz del Rio. Brilliant guy. He basically was the foreground miniatures. Where like you build, these pretty big miniatures, and you put them in front of the camera, and then way in the distance is your live action. You have a hole cut out in the miniature set, and that's where your live action. So you have like a mixture of the live action people and the models in the same shot without any optical processing. Which is why those shots still look good, because there was no there was no processing.
It was in camera.
It's just like a forced perspective that's making you're tricking your eyes into thinking the scale is like gigantic and tiny.
Yeah. So
Precisely.
Then you have that. You have the creature effect, which is it's here and there. So what point do you know when Dykstra walked off? Like where like I can look at parts of the movie and go, this is where obviously the visual effects were cut, the corners were cut. But like, do you know where that started to happen, or specifically like shots that were like, this is clearly like
there's almost no shots that were done by John Dykstra.
Like
he did a lot of the prep. He did a lot of the stuff at the sort of the front end. Like he developed essentially the technique that they did use for shooting the worms, which was got them on these miniature sets, basically with puppets shot very high frame rate. Because like when you shoot a higher frame rate, it kind of makes things look a little more real. And the sand in those shots were the things called micro balloons. They're these really, really, really microscopic little things that give you cancer.
Super toxic.
Super.
Oh. So the opposite of spice if you breathe it in.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. No, everybody was wearing masks on those sets, and
you'll go to a different place.
Yeah, so they developed that technique, but they wanted to do it in LA, and Raffaella wanted to do it in Mexico, which is what wound up happening. She wanted to keep everything in house, kind of under control budgetarily. Like she was like she was like a producer's producer. But I do want to say, like, I do want to give a shout out to Raffaella, because like to be a female producer, very young female producer, and she was only I think in her early 30s. She was in her early 30s, and she was making these gargantuan epics like Conan, the 2 Conan movies, Dune, Taipan, a lot of really, really big. Later she made Dragonheart.
I love Dragonheart.
I am the last. Yeah.
I don't think she gets enough credit for being like a Jerry Bruckheimer level producer, back when, in an era where, not a lot of women were making those kinds of genre movies. And the kind of movies she was making are the kind of movies that people want now. Like these comic book, type movies, fantasy movies. Yeah. Like that was her bread and butter.
Yeah. And it was such a boys club back then. I mean, even now, like it's hard now for women to work in Hollywood. So like, yeah, back then that takes a really impressive kind of person.
Yeah, that's enough, Ray. Max, keep going.
She's shaking her
All right,
fist.
look, as the producer of this podcast, we are running out of time. We're running out of budget, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this down.
I never get to make jokes like that. That's usually always me.
Now that you're out of arm's length, you're gonna
Right,
make
you're out of
you're gonna
slapping. You're
make
out
fun
of
of my wife,
slapping
thanks.
distance.
And of course, I do not mean that, Ray. Of course.
You better not.
I don't. I would not be here without you. So thank you.
She birthed you.
Yeah.
So okay, so basically that kind of explains a lot of the visual effects of what are the guns called? What do you call them? The
Weirding modules.
weirding like the weird stuff. The shield around the city, which is kind of like it seems like they just reuse the same shot over and over again. Some like I said, I think the sandworm stuff is actually pretty good, and the especially when they're right up against it. I was sitting there going, "That's actually really impressive. How the hell did they do that?" So you're right. All the stuff that's like during photography, it makes sense why some of that stuff actually looks really good, and then everything that's like post is kind of
it's a little shaky. Yeah, anything that involved like a lot of blue screen, like them riding the worms, looks pretty bad. I mean, like it looked bad back then. Like I have review excerpts of people making fun of it in 1984. So it's not just like, oh, well, now you look at it. No, it looked bad always. You know, then you have things like, I mean, I think the shield fighting looked cool as shit. And that was like there. It looks computer generated, and it's not. It is all animated by hand, and even the process of making them look all wobbly within the shields was done practically.
We're again
That's
watching that corridor video. They dive into the shield thing, and then they go.
Were
and
they
this
laughing derisively at it?
Well, they were just like because corridor crews like they love visual effects stuff, and so they're just like, can you believe that this was not done in a computer at all in any form? And he's like, this took 9 months, and Jenny Ray went, what?
I was shocked. And look, that's the shield effects in that movie. It's one of those things where I was more impressed after I heard how they did it. Because like when you first look at it, you're just like, that looks like hot garbage. Like it looked so bad to me. And then they're like, that was all completely hand animated with like different plates. And then I was like, I have so much respect for the artists who made that shot.
Those poor bastards.
Like those poor bastards who were like hand drawing cubes at like various distances.
They had these little motors that had these different shaped objects on them that would run over like sort of the plate as it was going through the optical printer or whatever, and that's what made the warping effect.
The warping? Oh, okay.
Interesting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, and supposedly the guys who went on to do the Predator effects in the '87 Predator movie consulted with Barry Nolan and his team about how they did those shields.
So there's some good that came out of that jank.
So it sounds like there were a little bit of like shit show elements and like pre-production, and then production was kind of hard, although everyone like had a fairly okay time on set. But like it seems like where it really fell apart was in post.
Yeah, they had it.
Yes, eventually, yes, it crawls on the floor towards the end. And so, after a year in Mexico, vomiting all the way. They get to the edit and whoops, change of studio head. A guy named Frank Price comes in, and you know it's not anything really personal against Dune. It's like sort of the standard protocol of any incoming studio head to kind of kill all the previous lion cubs. And Frank Price, you know, he told me, he's like, I would not have greenlit Dune. It's not a movie I would have made.
Oh, interesting.
And but he didn't hate it. He's just like, you know, it wasn't very coherent. I don't really know if audiences would understand it. But he also didn't really have any investment in trying to fix it. He's just like, this is what it is.
It wasn't his project, so he's just like, I don't want to put any effort into this.
He basically watched his ends of it, and then Sid Sheinberg, who is the chairman of MCA, he takes an interest in the film, and he starts putting more money into it, and he starts, but also demanding, edits, and at the behest of the exhibitors, says like this movie has to be, 2 hours and 15 minutes, can't be 3 hours. So that a lot of stuff gets jettisoned, and that's the real point where David, becomes very disenchanted with the process, and it's really Rafaela working with the editors to try to, make as many non-catastrophic decisions as possible. And, when the material that's on the cutting room floor,
Makes sense.
like some of it is, I don't know if it would have been missed too much by audiences. It's just like, it's more, sort of world building and scene setting, character building. It makes things go at a more sort of normal pace, as opposed to like in the finished film, as you saw, where it's kind of like last week on Dune,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe that I got when I was watching. And I was like, I feel like I was just kind of like dropped into this movie, and I was expected to know all this stuff.
Yeah,
but there's
you didn't have the handout. You didn't have the handout.
Yeah. I didn't know what Muad'Dib was. The Kwisatz Haderach. I didn't like these. I don't know what the fuck this is. So yeah, I totally get that. Like the world building aspect of that, even though it was expansive and really cool, but like there was something just kind of missing from like the general for just like the average moviegoer, because it did feel like I was just like dropped in. Here's Arrakis, and you should know it all. Like, oh, okay.
But then it also, like, to your point, Max, midpoint of this movie, it suddenly just starts sprinting toward the finish line in like a very clumsy way. Like it's very kind of like slow and deliberate at the start, and it actually like beat for beat is pretty similar to the Villeneuve version, where it's like, okay, like, yeah, that I remember that happening in the new movie, and that, and you can kind of track it. And I was actually worried, because I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch this, because I don't want it to spoil anything for me, because I haven't seen like, the new Dune movie that's coming out. And I was like, there's no possible way it could have spoiled anything, because I feel like it just goes, anyway, we just gotta like wrap this up. And they're in love. Yada, yada, yada.
He's ruling them all.
The movie's over, like it just absolutely just like toward the finish line. And you're just like, what did I just watch? And so like midpoint to the end, it's just a little bit like you can tell there was some like really aggressive editing happening, or something went on in the editing room.
It's almost like a what do they call that? A medley?
Yeah,
a medley of Dune.
A montage.
Yeah. Gotta have a montage. Yeah. It's really fascinating. And then you have things that are just insanely sloppy. Like there's a scene sort of in the middle where Leto and everybody are going out in the ornithopter to overseeing the spice harvesting, and then the worms coming, and then the carryall isn't around. And it's like you kind of know what a carryall looks like. They showed that to you earlier in the film book, but then they keep referencing this thing called spotters, and it's like if you see the Villeneuve movie, you know what a spotter is because it's in there.
Right.
And it's not in this movie at all. And it's like, and I looked at the storyboards, the original storyboards from Apogee. It's like, there's all the spotters. There's, it's like, and in the movie, they're still going like, Jürgen Prochnow is still like, all the men to the spotters, run!
Yeah.
There's no spotters.
Yeah. There's definitely like when watching that scene, because that one they just kind of land and then suddenly people are just running and jumping, and you're kind of like, I'm kind of confused about what exactly is going on.
Yeah, where are they running to? Are they like burying themselves in the sand? Like what's happening?
Yeah, why? Yeah. And this seems like something that would be happening all the time. Why is this so crazy? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Also in that scene, there's a couple of cutaways to like these tiny little vehicles that are rolling into the spice harvester, and you might see those shots and wonder, why are those in the movie? Because those are toys. Those were literally the prototypes for toys that were being made, and they wanted them in the movie, so they just shoved them in.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh my god!
And you might be thinking to yourself, now that you've watched this whole movie with people's nipples being torn out and people taking space cocaine, yes, there was a toy line for kids, and there were birthday party plates, and there were storybooks and pop-up books, and
That is fascinating.
Executives will do anything to make that money.
Yeah.
They don't care.
I mean, because they assumed it was going to be like what they wanted.
Star Wars.
Was Star Wars.
Yeah.
The merchandising alone
Yeah.
was just billions of dollars. So yeah.
I'm looking at
Yeah.
some of these toys right now, and they are amazing.
Yeah, one of the people I interview in the book, one of the journalists, remembers his mom buying him the sandworm toy, and he's like, he called it a ribbed for your pleasure nightmare toy that Freud would advise against buying.
That's amazing.
Yep. I can see it. Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Ripped for your pleasure. That's so funny. I just Googled the sandworm toy, and he's not wrong. It is a nightmare dildo.
Yes. And that too, that was part of the shit show aspect of doing the effect shots of the worms, because they specifically would not allow press to see the worms. They would not release photos to the press of worms, because it was like, if you shot them wrong, they would either look like turds or like big dicks with vagina mouths, with vagina dentata mouths. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're horrifying. Yeah, no, it's a wild movie, and it feels like Lynch is trying his damnedest to get away with making the weirdest movie he possibly can,
Right.
under such tight scrutiny. And that is the miracle of Dune, even as it exists, even in its very compromised, chopped down state. The David Lynchiness of it just shines through. Like, why the fuck is there a cat with a rat taped to it in a box?
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I had so many questions. Also, that cat and rat looked so mad. They were just like,
what is happening?
we're literally natural enemies, and you're taping us together? Like, get out of here.
I will tell you where in the production process the cat rat milking antidote box would have been cut out now. Immediately. It would have been like David being like, so I'm envisioning a cat and it's in a box with many, many wires and many bits of apparatus, and there is also a rat taped to it. And this fella, he's gonna be milked for an antidote so Thufir can keep himself alive.
Well, I mean, it must have been pretty influential on the toy makers, because the Fade action figure from 1984 includes the cat in the box.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
That's
God.
right. It is correct. Fun for everybody.
Like, there's a take-home kit, so
Yeah.
you can do that to your own cat and rat.
Yeah, there's some weird motherfucker out there who's modified it to actually milk
Work.
to come out.
Right?
Yeah,
Rat sold separately.
I want to meet that guy. I want to take a long taxi cab ride with that guy. But there's a lot of really good stuff that wound up on the cutting room floor. Like, there's, like I said, the whole fight with Jamis, where Paul kills Jamis, and then there's this moment after he's never killed anybody before. Paul's never killed anybody, and he's killed Jamis, and he starts crying, and all the Fremen are like fascinated by him, and they're like going up and they're like feeling the tears on his face, and they're like, he gives water to the dead. And it's a cool moment, because it's like, to them, like, water is precious. Like, you just killed this man who wanted to kill you. Why are you, wasting water for him? And it's like, that's part of, why the Fremen would want him to be their leader, because he's different. He's, there's something special about this guy. Instead, he just kind of becomes their leader.
Just in a freaking cut. It just suddenly just goes, hey guys, I'm ruling you now. All right.
Yeah,
okay.
that was part of the whole montage bit, like that Ray was talking about. Yeah. Oh, Chani. Oh, I'm in love. We've been fighting for 2 years or whatever. Oh, and you're our leader. Like,
oh yeah,
okay.
2 years. Like, what?
Yeah, the second half of this movie is like the cinematic equivalent of the Seinfeld yada 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 joke. Like, it's just like, anyway, don't worry about it. Some stuff happened.
I mean, he's the whitest guy there, and he has the least credit card debt, so I think he should be their leader.
Yeah.
But no, it is interesting, you know, and that's something too that like a lot more modern viewers, you know, talk about is like sort of the white savior arc, you know, that can be perceived in this movie, you know, but it's like if you know anything about the books, you know that Paul is not a white savior. He's actually like, you know, really bad for everybody. And, you know, yeah. And it's making the exact opposite, you know, it's not a pro-colonialism, you know, type of story. You know, Villeneuve's comes a little closer and like, they're all like multicultural. Like they all look like they're at Burning Man. But like, yeah, I mean, it is kind of a shame there's no actual Muslim people in the new movie, even though they're using a lot of Muslim terminology and stuff.
Yeah,
like
for
that.
sure, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, okay, so that actually answers something I have a problem with both movies, which is, in general, I don't really care for Paul. And, like, I'm not sure why I should be following him, or am I supposed to be rooting for him? And the idea that, like, in the book, it's basically setting up that he's becoming a dictator, that he is becoming someone evil, like a Citizen Kane type character, where it's like
That's a really good comparison.
You're watching the fall of someone who's dipping into the dark side, and I don't get that at all in either film. So in general, I'm sitting there going, I don't know why I should care. Why would I even worry about all these people? Is he important? Why is he important? And so I think that's very fascinating that both of them, well, I mean, part 2 hasn't come out yet of the new one. Yeah. But like,
I mean, Villeneuve's definitely leaning into that. Like, you know, he says in the first part, you know, basically the Bene Gesserit have been laying the groundwork for Paul to come and be perceived as, you know, the whatever chosen one figure.
Interesting.
And it's a sham. It's supposed to be a sham. You know, it's like the Bene Gesserit have foresight, because that is a real power that they have, and Paul has it too. But he's not really a god, and his coming was only foretold because the Bene Gesserit planted the seeds of it within this group, and and that's all really interesting stuff. I mean, like, it's a shame that you know, Lynch didn't get to do Dune Messiah, the follow-up, because he becomes a more fascinating character in Dune Messiah, because he, you know, you really start to see him as who he is. He's a reluctant dictator, and who really just wants to just be a different person. And you know, I found David's.
I was going to ask about this.
Yeah, half the script that David wrote for what would have been the Dune 2, the sequel. He started writing it in late 1983, early 1984, before things really went south in the editing. And he was contracted to make 3. He was contracted to make a trilogy. Oh. And they were going to shoot Dune Messiah and Children of Dune back to back in 1986. That was the plan. And they were storing props, costumes, miniatures, sand.
Micro balloons.
Everybody put a little sand in your pocket on the way out. It's for the sequel. Put it in a Ziploc bag. We're using that on Dune 2. And yeah, and that script is fascinating, because it you know, it's kind of like Dune 1. Like, it's very true to Herbert's book. Like, a lot of the dialogue is right out of it. A lot of the scenes are right out of the book. And then they'll just be like some really crazy out of left field, you know, David Lynch shit.
That sounds like a much more interesting arc for Paul than I would expect. Like, that kind of reluctant dictator role. And I'm curious to see where the Villeneuve version goes, because that also feels like something that modern audiences like wouldn't like or want, right? Like, people want their heroes to be heroes and their villains to be villains, and that kind of like gray area stuff like is generally, that's not like commercial, right? When you think about like a commercial film. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go with it. in the next
And
one.
if people like it.
Yeah.
It will interest me to see if Villeneuve and Warner Brothers are willing to, go there. Yeah, I've watched sort of the blockbuster movie just become more and more and more homogenous.
Yeah.
As it's gone on, to the point where just like, all the edges are just, beat down with a belt sander. Like, everything is done super, super safe. Like, I just watched Wonka, and I'm like, how is the 1971 version of this way more edgy than this? Yeah, and I could say the same thing about David Lynch's Dune. Like, all respect to Denis Villeneuve and what he's trying to accomplish. I think, Denny was doing the most accessible version of the
For
film.
sure.
And David was leaning in to the strangeness and the foreignness and the feeling of being dropped in media res into a world that you might not understand on first, second, third, fourth, fifth viewing. And I think that's the point. That's part of the joy of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely like that was actually my favorite thing about it was how fucking weird it was. Like I the quality of it notwithstanding, like it was that it was leaning into
The weirdness.
yeah, just here's these weird people that have evolved into lava spewing monsters and just all the weird exposition dumps. When you were talking about it, it's like it's crazy to me that they didn't change any of like the verbiage. It was just like, this is the verbiage for this weird shit. You're gonna have to get on board or go away and watch it again later.
Yeah, I get it. Like, I've been that guy. I've been the guy making fun of Dune, and it's very easy to make fun of Dune, and and to make fun of its its weirdness and its all of its technical faults and and all the botched storytelling and everything. But it's a movie that the more I watch it, the more I fall in love with it. And is somebody, this guy Mark Bennett, who runs one of the longest running Dune websites called Dune Info. He has my favorite quote about it, which is that Lynch's Dune is like the Venus de Milo. Like, you admire it for what's there, not what is.
I like that.
And there's a lot there. There's a lot to chew on, and like I said before, like if you compare it to movies making now, like there's no comparison. It's like this is a movie, with a real authorial voice and a real vision and huge swings. Whether they land or not. It's like it takes big bold swings all the way through, and it's just there's some truly mind-blowing stuff in it, and
for sure.
it's a stunner to look at. I really love it, and it since my book started coming out, one of the things I've really enjoyed is having people come out of the woodwork, kind of being like, oh yeah, I love this movie, I'm going to come out of the closet, I like this movie, I think it's really good. And it's a great community too. Like, I mean, I've seen some real toxic fandoms over the years,
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name them, Star Wars, Zack Snyder, Christopher Nolan, but like, then
you really have listened to our show.
The thing of Ghostbusters, but like, the thing is, the Dune community, it's really not that toxic. It's really, they're really across the board pretty decent people. I think, especially for Lynch Dune, because that's a real interesting group, because I don't think anybody's operating under the delusion that it's a perfect movie.
Yeah. And it's not a franchise that's been run into the ground. And with repeats and generations coming into it that have different mindsets on it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's honestly fascinating to me that there weren't more swings taken at this movie between the Lynch version and then the one that we got a couple years ago. That there weren't like, oh yeah, like there's like 7 or 8 different movie versions of this like in between.
Yeah, I mean, they tried. Peter Berg wanted to do it. Thank God
Berg,
it didn't.
Yep. We could do a whole episode on just trying to do it a second time.
Trying to spin up another Dune.
Writing that Dune 2 article for Wired, it was cool as like kind of like a thought experiment. Like, you know, like what if they made it?
What if?
And then what if they made another one after that? And like, and they were still making movies today, like they are with Star Wars and Indiana Jones and all these other things. What if they were still making legacy sequels to David Lynch's Dune? You know?
Dune released December 14th, 1984, with a budget of somewhat around 40 million.
We'll say 40-ish.
Okay.
That's a happy medium.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
And it only grossed 30 million. Opening weekend, it was second place behind the second weekend of Beverly Hills Cop. For 1984, it was the 50th highest grossing.
Yeah.
And to give you an idea of what they were dealing with, 1984 was, in order of box office, Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, Gremlins, Karate Kid, Police Academy, Footloose, Beverly Hills Cop, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, Terms of Endearment, and Romancing the Stone. Many of which we've actually talked about.
Yeah, damn. I'm like, that's a lineup.
So
that was a good year for movies.
It was a good year, but apparently not for David Lynch.
On Dune, I started selling out even in the script phase, knowing I didn't have Final Cut, and I sold out. So it was a slow dying the death and a terrible, terrible experience.
Do you regret making it?
Yes, except it just nailed this idea, never, ever do a film without Final Cut. And why would I have done it? I don't know how it happened. I trusted that it would work out, but it was very naive and the wrong move.
Well, so the last thing we do on this is we ask, was it worth it? Max, you kind of gave us your thing about how you're kind of grown to love it.
I wrote a 560-page book about it, so I'm leaning toward yes, it was worth it.
Yeah.
I do want to note for people listening, like when you hear that number, 560 pages, you're like, Jesus Christ, do you think you're James Michener or something? The book is, I mean this sincerely, the book is written to be fun. The book is sectioned off and sort of chunked so you can easily skip over sections you're not interested in. Like if you don't give a fuck about costumes, just skip over this part. If you don't give a shit about the music by Toto, then skip this part because I'm going to talk to Toto.
Right.
You know.
So yeah, I mean, it sounds like for you, it was definitely worth it. I'll say, like, for me, even though I didn't particularly love the film, like I think it was worth it just for all the things we've talked about, right? The influences that it had on science fiction going forward, and like how so many other movies like borrowed concepts and sort of used that as like a kind of launching off point to, you know, start these other franchises like Star Wars. So just like the pure impact on pop culture that it had, I think it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, I think it was worth it too. It's unfortunate that the box office didn't reflect just kind of what, you know, probably David Lynch or the studio or anybody else really wanted, but. You know, and, you know, the more that we've been talking about it, the more I've like come into the realization, you know, I think I liked it a little bit more than I did upon first watching. And maybe that's the beauty of it, is just that it's just one of those things where you watch it and something else comes to your mind and, you know, something new shows up. And it's just, it seems like it's more, if you're listening to this now and you've never seen Dune, I recommend just do it, because now you probably have a better understanding, having had, you know, this conversation with us. You know, just give it a chance and see if you don't like it.
Well, it's like that VFX shot with the shields, right? Like you watch it, you're like, don't love it. But then once you learn more about how it was made, you're like, all right, I respect the hell out of the people who made that, right? Like the learning about the behind the scenes, it grows on you.
Yeah, when I first watched, I was like, this is weird. They look blocky. It looks like Gumby and the Blockheads are fighting, you know. But then hearing the story of like how it was made, I was like, well, that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
For me, I'm kind of a mixed bag on it. I think because it drags its feet at the beginning, then it rushes the ending. Like it is kind of a mess. I definitely watched it with the perspective of kind of going, I see what they're going for. Like like I said, there's big swings, and it is just absolutely bonkers from head to toe. But you cannot be like, even though you might be bored, the sets alone and the costuming are just so fascinating and so like, oh, this is not the cheap piece of shit that I thought like maybe it had the reputation of having. Like there was a lot of work that went into this. Like they were expecting something big.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely appreciate that. I kind of am a little sad that I never watched this as a kid, because I feel like if I watched this as a kid, it probably would have been those movies. Like, I fucking love Dune.
Yeah, I felt the same way too.
Yeah. It just seems like one of those movies where you're just like, you love it. Like Kroll, just a weird fucking movie that you just only existed at that time, and you love it because you watched it as a kid and it was just super impressionable.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of worth it. You mean, we got David Lynch to do other things, and David Lynch is who he is now, a complete character.
You're right. People really did expect big things from this. At the beginning of 1984, I believe Forbes magazine made the prediction that Dune would outgross E.T.
Oh, man.
Wow.
They
Doomed him. They doomed him.
That just shows you how outsized the expectations were for this film.
They didn't have the foresight like the Bene Gesserit.
You know,
Yeah.
they did not. Well, this was great. I loved chatting with you guys. This is a great show.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so much fun and
Yeah.
so informational, informative.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, it's definitely if you listen to our podcast, like we definitely watch some crap, but we understand that the people who made it are people, and that's maybe not what they were intending. Like you said, like the people loved making this, and you know, some of that really comes through.
But that's what that's what I like about your show is like there's so many shows out there that are just like, hey, we watched this dumb thing.
Yeah.
And it's your show isn't that, because like you cover some good movies too.
Yeah.
It's not about whether the movie is good or bad. It's about how big of a shit show it was.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way, for understanding that, because I feel like so many people are like, you thought that this amazing movie that we loved was a shit show? Like, how dare you? And it's like, similar to the reviewers who didn't obviously
Regardless.
finish your book. It's like, did you listen to the podcast?
Did
Like,
you watch
Yeah.
the videos? Yeah.
Did you watch it?
Yep.
But you've done
Yeah.
like Gremlins, you've done Ghostbusters, like you've done Romancing the Stone. It's like,
Yeah. We've
No, I
done a
mean,
lot of movies
I
that we
just-
loved, but they're
Yeah.
just hard as shit to make.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. This was so great. Such a fascinating movie. So where plug yourself? Where people can find you? Where can they get your book?
Well, I am on the social media site formerly known as Prince. I think you know the one I'm talking about. The one that has a swastika now as a symbol. So yeah, I'm on there. And if you're less interested in the me of it all than the Dune of it all, go to my Instagram, which is just my name and the number 1, MAXEVRY1. That's all devoted to my book and David Lynch's Dune. Lots of fun stuff in there, including some stuff that's not in the book. And I plug all my, appearances and stuff there. I'm hoping to do a lot more cool stuff this year for the 40th anniversary of Dune, which this is.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
and they just announced it's coming back to theaters for a little bit.
Yeah.
I saw that. Yeah.
I just clinched a thing here in Brooklyn to host a screening of it in hopefully May.
Cool.
And that'll probably be a print. So that'll be amazing because I've never seen it in the theater before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
you
That
totally
sounds
did.
awesome.
It's weird for somebody who wrote who devoted 2 years of their life to writing a book about a movie they'd never seen in the theater. But honestly, it's a movie that is rarely played in theaters. So yeah, if you've never seen it before, please go to that Fathom event, check it out, and have a blast. Like it's a really fun movie, and I like evangelizing for it because it's almost like the direct opposite of a lot of the shit that we're getting now. That has no art or soul or vision or anything
Right.
to it. But yeah, you can find out all about that stuff at my website, www.maxevry.com.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Max. It was
Thank
great
you,
to talk
Max.
to you.
Yeah.
May the hand of God be with you.
And also with you. I don't know what the customary response is to that.
May you walk without rhythm.
Yeah.
Oh, may
Yeah,
you
there you
walk
go.
without rhythm so you won't attract the worm.
the worm. There you go.
There you go.